kind of
Sorry, I'm going to record this.
and me figuring out really what I wanted to do with my life and focus on was probably the heaviest weight I had. So figuring that out was probably the most difficult part. Once you figure out what you want to do and what your passion is, and what I figured it out, it took me a couple of years. It took me 6 years in college, best 6 years of my life. But it's one of those things where once you really start to fine tune and focus on yourself and find what makes you happy, which it took me a while, I realized I could do this the rest of my life. Now, what changes is things evolve. I started out in marketing and pretty much cold calling. That transitioned to, this is a quick summary, but then I went to design, climbed the ladder in design. Then I went to art directing, creative directing. I saw kind of the market switching to more digital products, right? So traditional marketing was kind of falling a little lower on the priority list for, new companies. So currently, about 2.5 years ago now, we ended up starting our own software company. And the software that we build really focused on user experience. And that was something that I learned kind of from my past in when you're doing design or social media, there's markets, right? There's demographics, there's who is going to be viewing this logo, who's going to be looking at this campaign, who's going to be reading this ad, who's going to be reading this social post. And as you start to understand who your audience is, you start to see things like I would just be walking through, in my daily life saying, I could do that better. I could make a better mark for that. I could build a better website. This user, experience is poor. I could do a better job of that. Now, I'm not a developer. I'm not a coder. I took a couple classes in college and I knew that was not what I was going to focus on. Lucky for me, I found a partner who is brilliant. And so I didn't have to worry about that side. So I left, well, I guess you'd call it, I left the creative space. I still feel like we do creative work, but I left it probably 2 years ago. The things we kind of focus on now, obviously me is interaction. How do you get engagement? The company I built now is called Devella. We build interactive products pretty much across the range. So we do law firm CRMs. We do the majority of work we do for home builders. We have a custom CRM system that is heavily focused on buyer interaction, interactive sales offices, floor plans, anything that can engage the buyer to kind of promote them to go to the builders that we work with, right? There's tons of builders out there. There's tons of products out there. How can you make your product stand out? How can you make it better? How can you make it more user-friendly so that people aren't kind of collapsing in the scenario? And while that is probably the top tier, you can break that down across every industry, every platform, whatever you're focusing on. It's good to say, how can I do this better for my target audience, for my client? In kind of hearing, what schools you guys go to and what you're focusing on. I think one of the most valuable things that I did was get myself in front of people. If you're a designer and you just want to design and you're not a people person, which you're probably not with Amber, if you're not a people person, because she's very relationship driven. That's completely fine. There are people who just are comfortable doing design. I was lucky enough, I graduated from University of Arizona, and that program, so I graduated with a degree in visual communications, minor in business management and marketing. So double minor major. And I think one of the most valuable things that program taught me is, instead of, obviously the technical aspect of it is great, but it's how you, bless you, but it's how you really relate to the client that kind of pumped me up and really built my skills. And they had a really unique program to where you weren't just doing a logo and presenting it to the class. They would actually bring clients in. So you had to sell your work. And so it wasn't just, oh, you're in front of 20 other students, you're presenting to a client. And getting yourself in those uncomfortable positions, but hearing other people, how they sell. Amber's one of the best in the business at just being able to sell and engage. Sorry, were you talking to me? Okay. So it's one of those things where I think the more and more you engage yourself in those communications with your clients, with your audience, the more impressive your kind of resume will become, because you can relate to them. Design is it's like art, right? It's very subjective. You need to stay kind of true to yourself. And then if you love a logo, or you love a website, or you love a campaign, and you're not sure it's going to click with the client, they might not understand it right off the bat. It's your job to sell it. And if you don't sell it, or you can't sell it, my first year I was actually an architecture major. And that was probably one of the most interesting years of my life, because those professors don't care. You build something and you'd walk up and you'd present it, and they'd be ripping your model apart that you'd spent hours on. And you had to learn quickly. You got to have thick skin. You can't take things personally. Business is cutthroat. And it's one of those things where you just have to take every lesson like that as a learning opportunity to grow and become better. And you really start to find yourself listening to others. And then if they're fighting you on a design or fighting you on a logo, take that and go back and try and rework it. Your first concept, you might fall in love with it, but it's probably not the right, solution. And so maybe it is, but you have to push yourself outside those boundaries of, that one's awesome, but let's just pretend I never built it. Let's start over. Because you can be focusing on yourself, but you also have to keep your clients in mind, your audience in mind, your target demographic in mind. Because if you're not writing for the specific market, it doesn't matter how good that paragraph is, it's not going to click, right? They're not going to relate to it. So it becomes really a balance of stay true to yourself, but also make sure you are addressing the client needs, the client requirements, that sort of thing. And that's across the board, whether you're selling something. We have a business management major, social media, obviously there's tips and tricks with social media of teases and how can you quickly get across with, in under 170 characters, et cetera. And then designs and logos, how quickly does that impact hit them? So
I love it. So Zach, I want to mention a couple of takeaways for the team really quick. The first one that I think that Zach hit on that I want you guys to underline, highlight, double underline, is that you always need to be aware of how you're interacting in the world. Okay. So this is what I talk about all the time. You don't get to block out creativity time for the rest of your life. You get to become a creative person, which means being aware of what's happening around you. Those are the podcasts that you're listening to, the shows that you're watching, the way that the producers splice together something on Real Housewives. That's art, guys. And the way that they're communicating that to you is the stuff that you need to pay attention to that nobody else is. That's what being a creative person is about. It's about seeing those things that happen in the way that you're interacting with the world and knowing there's intention behind it. You become a better artist when you're able to see that intention, like communicate what they're doing and why, and then you can replicate that on your own. And what that means, this is point number 2, what Zach said, that is the double underline highlight. Customer focus is everything. So this is the other thing that I always say about like how psychology and self-development and marketing fits together. The more self-aware you can be of how you interact in the world, the better. That's for, understanding what's going on. But when you have the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and anticipate how they're going to interact with or respond to a color, a logo, an interface at McDonald's when you're ordering on an iPad. When you have these types of conversations in your head, you're able to then take that information and apply it to a client who's not yet there yet. Okay, so that's what Zach does. So for example, he talks about interactive floor plans and builder stuff. That's the biggest project that I got the privilege of working on with Zach when we did this, the most complicated housing project I've ever seen in my entire life, 168 units that were put together like Legos, and being able to really easily break that down for the client so they could understand it, because we as builders couldn't understand it. It was a really big challenge. So we had to put ourselves in the customer shoes and being like, okay, if I'm walking into this project, what's my like flow chart of thinking? And then how can I, as the marketer, make it really easy for them to understand? Okay, that's point number 2, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. Point number 3, you are always selling. I do not care what your major is, what your job is. You are always selling your ideas, yourself, to try to get the job, to try to get the promotion, to get a new software that's going to make your life easier and you don't have budget for it. You have to be persuasive and learn how to sell. And then the last thing, this is just a little side note too, Zach's comment about engagement and how people engage with the world. This is relevant for everybody, what they're working on right now. It's social media, right? It's like, we're always talking about that. We're looking for engagement. We're looking for engagement. We want somebody to, and let's take the root of the word, like what that really means. We want them to be interested and dive in and play with us. Engagement is not just a double tap. That's like the surface level of what we're looking for in engagement. For somebody to be engaged with their brand, it means they like click through and then they go down a rabbit hole of your page. If we're not creating that experience for our clients, we need to work on doing that more, because that's what engagement really, really is. The metric is just the surface. So Zach, I want to go back and let's bunny hop really quickly and touch on the jobs that you had starting at the beginning of your career in marketing and working your way back up to creative director, and tell us what the title was and what you did there. And then when we get to creative director, I want to know, what's a creative director?
Oh boy. Okay. So yeah. So well, actually, I started interning. Oof, how long ago was that? In 2004, and it was a marketing firm in Tucson, and I had the pleasure of learning under somebody who was very similar to Amber. Just very spoke well, had a soft sell when she needed to, had a hard sell when she needed to, because there's a very fine line. And depending on who you're working with, you either take one route or the other. And my position was very interesting because I was focused on graphic design at the time, but I was also a bartender, so I knew my personal skills were great. So it was this hybrid role where I was doing small graphics for large events. For Wells Fargo, they put on award ceremonies, stuff like that. So I was the graphic designer, but I was also cold calling to get donations for silent auction items. So again, you're always communicating, you're selling, and I'm also designing. So I had to think, okay, I'm selling auction items on one hand, so I'm using my left brain on how to convince them to donate this, that, but I'm also using my right side in the creation of the materials for the actual events, that sort of thing. We did small logo projects here and there, but it was mainly, let's call it collateral, for the events. But because I was the only designer, I had to almost kind of learn the ways of an art director or creative director really early, and kind of get those communication skills. I remember having to practice with my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, selling certain things, because the more comfortable you get with your design or your campaign or your copy, the more comfortable you are, they're going to see it in your pitch and they're going to feel more comfortable. If you're not sure, if you waver, you're like, well, I use this color and I'm not sure. Nope, there's got to be a reason. If there wasn't a reason and you just randomly went to, color palette or whatever, make up a reason. Like, there's always got to be a reason. Because if you didn't think that reason through, they're going to catch you on it. They're going to say, why rounded? Why sans serif? Why serif? Why was your tone this? So you better be prepared. And so that position really kind of threw me into the art director world quickly, even though I wasn't really an art director. But it kind of gave me a well-rounded base, which I recommend. Even if you're just a designer, even if you're social media, you have to understand everything that goes into marketing. everything that goes into advertising. It's not just, here's your niche. That's not how it works. And if you want to grow as an actual businessman or woman, you need to be thinking at all angles. Because you might not be the one selling, but guess what? You're going to go to the creative director. You're going to sell it to him, because the better you sell it to him, the better they can sell it to the clients. So you've got to be very careful on how you present your product.
And then, I'm sorry, Zach, just to clarify, what was your job title at that position?
Technically graphic designer.
Okay. And then what was the next step up from that for you?
So after that, so I was there for a while. Then Tucson's such a small market, ready to get out. So came back to Phoenix. I think getting across personality is good. People have got to feel comfortable with you. I remember spending hours on my cover letter. Certain things, like I was focused in graphic design. There's certain things I'll never use. I will never use papyrus. It was so overused at the time. It's papyrus and Zapfino. It was like, oh, what are we, a spa? Yeah, okay, well, 95% of spas use papyrus, or at the time, Zapfino. So you have to get across personality. So I focused, I don't even know, tens of hours on this cover letter, and I landed the job at Bluefish. And this was 2006. So I went from an intern to a designer in Tucson. And then I came down to the Phoenix market, and my real agency kind of homecoming. I always knew I wanted to work in an agency. Okay, so Bluefish was the first kind of introduction to true agency life for me. I started off with just simple collateral. I was, a junior designer. I had an absolutely brilliant creative director who took the time to help train junior designers, which was awesome. You're going to get creative directors who are more focused on themselves than helping younger people kind of climb the ladder. And you know what you have to do? Just go home and work hard yourself. If they're not going to reach out, if they're not going to extend the hand, the training, I think that's what Amber does so great, is she takes you guys under her wing and she really helps develop and hone skills. Soak up everything, because you're not always going to have the type of boss. You're going to have the type of boss who sometimes expects everything from you. You can't be asking questions. They just expect. If you're not performing, you're gone. So if it's that type, then you need to be going home at 5:15, eat dinner, and work on your craft. Whether it's taking a logo that you love and trying to rebuild it, or reading through PR strategies. You have to hone your craft. It's not a 9-to-5 thing. It's something that is, like you said, you're walking around. She mentioned the McDonald's, which is an absolutely perfect example. Their UI and UX is phenomenal, and you have to learn from those. You have to learn from the experiences. You have to learn from just walking around, real world life, talking to people. And you have to be able to be aware of what you can improve on. You can always get better. So pick those areas that you want to focus on and spend a quarter focusing on that specific area. You're bad at selling, you're bad at communicating. Call up Amber, say, here's a pitch. I'd love to, toss it in front of you. Use your connections, go to your boyfriend, go to your girlfriend, go to your parents. You're going to have projects where the demographic, we have communities, the demographic is 65 plus. I'm not 65 yet, but I have to kind of get myself in their position to where, how can I make this user experience so simple that my parents can use it? And sometimes it's a challenge because you're kind of so focused on you're 20, you're 22, whatever. It looks modern, it looks cool, but to the 65-year-old, they'll be like, whoa, that font, I can't read it. And it's like, but it's cool. It just doesn't work. So you have to kind of, grow with, kind of the surroundings. So I started off at Bluefish as a junior designer. I moved into designer position. I was at Bluefish for a total of, I believe, 15 years. I learned a ton. We had an absolute huge range of clients, from home builders to law firms to, I was the art director for large stadiums, University of Phoenix Stadium, which is now State Farm Stadium. We had clients across the country, all markets. So I was lucky because I kind of got to pick and choose the projects I wanted to work on. And if you kind of just focus in one area, it's tough to kind of start to move around and think about, okay, well, here's a home builder, but now here is the Cardinals or the Phoenix Suns. Totally different, right? Totally different, brands, totally different elements, design elements. And so you have to be able to just kind of flip switches and kind of be able to move forward. And getting into the role of an art director or a creative director, you have to be able to flip a switch. You have to be able to give yourself, I'm going to work on this project for 45 minutes to an hour. And if I'm stuck or got nowhere, or I'm flying, try just turning it off, switch to a different project, because sometimes you get so closely trying to figure out a sentence or a paragraph or a color or a shape that you're too close to it. You just need to take a step away, take back off, get onto another project and just, make your brain work. I probably one of the biggest criticisms I see with people coming out of college right now is they expect to be handed things. They aren't comfortable working for things. They go home at 5, and I was the guy. I wanted to go home and play Madden or play Tiger Woods golf. That's what I wanted to do, but you have to invest in yourself for your future self. If you don't, you're going to be stuck in that hole for a long time. So you've got to be willing to take that extra step.
Zach, can I ask you a question real quick? Because we're toggling, or you're toggling between two things that I think would really help even me for separation of the two titles, art director versus creative director. What are the differences as it relates to interfacing with clients, directing the other designers? Can you break down those differences for us?
Yeah, so it depends a little bit on the firm or the agency you're with. Creative directors in a typical agency, if you're talking about a large 30 to 75 person agency, creative directors are the ones that are usually taking all of the designs from junior designers, and art directors and selling them. I had seen enough movies where I knew I wanted to be in that sales role. I wanted to be pitching. I wanted to be presenting, but I loved the creative aspect of it. So I still wanted to do. If you're in a huge agency and you're a creative director, you might not necessarily be doing a lot of creative, which is unfortunate, because staying in tune and that sort of thing provides growth and benefit. But a lot of times creative directors aren't doing much design. If you're in a large agency, you might be working on TV, radio spots, something like Amber, where it's not just a logo, it's across the board. It's a whole campaign. Art directors typically are working more with the designers. They're usually more of the teachers, the aides, okay, let's push this, where were you going with that? Typically that's the role of an art director. And then the art director takes the concepts, presents them to the creative director. The creative director says, yep, we're going to go with this. It's usually a round table, and let's go back to the designer, have them tweak these things. But as a designer, I always wanted to listen in on those conversations, because those pitches that the art director was making the creative director were extremely valuable in learning my pitch to the art director. Mm-hmm. So as an art director, it was a little more of a hands-on role. I probably learned more art directing because you build your skills when you're training other people. You guys are young, so you're focused on your work, but you develop and you grow immensely when you are helping other students or younger, designers improve, or, you start asking them questions. Why, where, why, how, what was your thought process? Hearing them talk about their design and then say, okay, but did you ever think about coming at it from this, this perspective? Because clients are going to ask.
With that being said, Zach, too, I want to just relate it back outside of the design world too, especially for Spatika and Perla. When you guys are talking about things outside of design, it's the same hierarchy in most verticals, right? So you have a doer, you have a director, and then you have somebody that's like really selling to the clients or maintaining those relationships a lot of the times. For Emily and for Gabriella, was that helpful for you to break down the differences? Was it what you thought?
I think it was a little bit of what I thought. Like, definitely, like, art directors are going to be more like creative, like working on the design of stuff, and then goes to the creative, and then they present the information to the client. So I've watched like a ton of Mad Men, so like I kind of like got that aspect from there. But it definitely was helpful for Zach to like break it down for us.
I love it. No, Mad Men is super educational. I recommend it to everybody. Emily, do you have any thoughts on that?
So funny. I was watching What Women Want last night.
Another great one.
Like similar vibes, but yeah, I definitely always kind of associated the creative director with less doing, more directing and communicating with the client. So
I love it. It's the same thing as if you guys can remember with Justin's talk. Remember, it's like as you move up from counsel to senior counsel to director, counsel is like working the cases. Senior counsel, they're overseeing the people that are working the cases. And then director, they're interfacing with all like the chief legal officer and all the scary people above, right? So let's go ahead. I want to switch gears a little bit and have you guys have the opportunity to ask questions of Zach, because I think that's the most important part. So I'll just pick on somebody. Spatika, do you have a question or feedback or thought that you'd like Zach to respond to?
Yeah, and thanks so much for coming and speaking to us again, Zach. My Wi-Fi might be a little bit iffy, so I don't know if it's me or whatever it is.
Okay.
I don't know why I've never asked Amber this question as well, but what was it like kind of going off and starting your own business? And you mentioned kind of how you didn't really like that coding part, but you went out and you found a partner to jump in and do that. How did you kind of convince those people like, hey, what I'm doing is going to be great, like come with me, join me along this process?
It's a great question. Starting your own business is something that I felt that I always wanted to do. You have those relationship people that when you start to build that platform, those relationships, starting your own business is easy. It's just that first jump in that's challenging. It's like, oh dear, I'm going from a salaried position to now every dollar I make, I have to work for. And I had the benefit of being able to moonlight while I was at Bluefish. So I could develop relationships and client contacts outside of my agency. Some agencies won't let you do that. They want you working on their work. That's it. And that's fine. Do smaller projects for friends and family because you start to understand value of your work. Undervaluing is probably one of the biggest, quickest ways to go out of business. You know, you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to do a logo for $1,500. And they come back and they're like, oh, I was looking for 400. You've got to know what your time is worth. If you can pitch it at 1,500, then do it for 1,500. If it's a job that you really want and you're willing to take a pay cut, to give you an example, we just signed Taylor Morrison. I wanted that company, and it was to throw numbers out. To get on board with them, we took a huge cut, but I knew I just wanted the in. And sometimes you have to do that. You've got to. We're working for pretty much for free for an entire year, but I knew I wanted that in. I wanted that client on my resume, and so I kind of was like, all right, I'm going to take the hit. And you have to know when to take those hits. Is it going to open up opportunities for future work? So kind of starting your own thing, I always recommend don't go from full employee to starting your own company if you don't think you're ready. Practice the engagement, practice the types of jobs you'll be working on, those types of things while you're working as a designer or an art director or social, that sort of thing. Build your client list. Who do you want to work with? I knew when I started working with Amber, I mean, we had our fair share of headbutts in pitches, but I knew she knew what she wanted. She was always looking out for the client, and she was always looking out for the best product to put forward to the consumer. So as you're growing and as you're kind of getting jobs and getting out of college, you're going to start to meet people that you're like, I don't know when I'm going to do business with them, but I'm going to do business with them. And keep those relationships. I don't burn bridges. I hate burning bridges because you never know who knows who knows who. So you always want to come forth with a positive attitude, your best foot forward, because people will remember. They will remember, hey, you wanted $1,500. All they had was 500 because maybe they just started their own business. Put yourself in their shoes. Great. You know what? I'm going to offer up my services at a discount, and I'm going to help you out because I get it. I completely understand. Now I'm not going to give you 100 hours worth of work for $500, unless you're truly passionate and you're gonna improve from it. Then maybe you will. I've lost plenty of money on jobs, but if the outcome was worth it to you and you grew, then it was worth it. So it's definitely kind of one of those situations where just make sure, even though your position you're in, you're always thinking about, okay, when I start my business, do I have my ducks in a row? Am I financially capable? Am I responsible? Am I not going to get $100 for a logo and I'm going to go buy a pair of shoes? Like, you can't do that. You have to start investing in your future.
So with that, I want to give a takeaway because that's such a great question, Spatika. And I don't know who of this group I've shared the story with before, but Brad, who was the CEO of Zephyr that I worked for, one time I coordinated a tour with him at the park, which was a big project downtown in San Diego. We're standing on the roof of a 14-story building, and somebody asked him that exact same question. And what he said was, the person that gave me the funding to start this project was the first person I met when I showed up to California from Buffalo, New York with $20 in my pocket. This other guy I met at a ULI seminar, his name's Malcolm Davies. And because we were friends from the beginning and we were both starting, we had no money. Look at us 15 years later, he's the one financing my company or my business. So again, to an action item, if you guys are not keeping an Excel spreadsheet, a Google sheet or whatever of the people that you are making connections with now, you need to. We talk about this like bullseye, right? You're in the middle, you've got your, kind of starring people in your life, your family, your close friends. The people that are on the outside of that interior bullseye need maintenance, and you're going to forget about them if you don't write them down. That was perfect timing to give everybody like 5 minutes for a question. So let's go to a next one. Tan, do you have anything that you wanted to ask about?
Yeah, so hi, Zach. One of the questions I had like written down that I wanted to get to know was, because I want to go into creative direction as well, is like, what are the most like valuable skills that you see that takes to be a creative director?
Creative director is an interesting position. And like I said, depending on the firm you're with or the agency you're with, certain characteristics are going to be valued a little more. Obviously, communication from a creative director standpoint is number one. Whether you're selling and communicating a certain campaign to a client, or you're communicating with the account staff or the owner, communication is absolutely pivotal. To Amber's point, when thinking about being in a creative director's position, you have to kind of because creative director is one of those things where you never really know what the role is going to be until you get there. And so kind of challenging to prepare yourself to get thrown in a $150,000 pitch. It's like, dear Lord, a lot is resting on my shoulders, because a lot of times the owners will back off, and it's up to you to sell that creative concept that your entire team has put hours and hours into. It all falls on your shoulder. So it's a lot of pressure, but I think the communication and confidence is huge, because the more confident you come off in selling the direction or selling the campaign, the more comfortable they're going to be. Usually, or in the past, data is a little less important. But these larger agencies with pitches, it's not creative. It's, here's a whole bunch of to support our campaign. Why are we, focusing on radio this much, or why are we focusing on, TV or ad spend or social? So you have to kind of know and understand each of those elements that go into a pitch for a creative, campaign or event, because they're going to say, okay, well, why were you focused so heavily on, $50,000 for the website? Well, let's talk about engagement. Data says, 75% of the recurring blah, 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 blah. So you have to be able to spin things, even if you've never thought it before. That's why I say, I always, like Amber had said, if you're sitting on a plane with a random person, engage in a conversation. Get yourself out of the comfort box, talk to them about what they do, they might randomly say something and you're like, that's interesting. My girlfriend does that, or that's what my dad does. And you can start to talk about different markets, because as a creative, while yes, you're directing creative, you have to understand the markets that you're selling to, whether it's business, whether it's a corporate law firm, whether it's a small mom and pop law firm, whether it's the Cardinal Stadium. You have to understand these markets, and you have to fully digest all of that, because consuming it and understanding it is going to make your pitch easier as a creative director. Creative director, obviously the top of the food chain from a creative standpoint. So it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of kind of understanding, who you're selling to and what you want to do with the project, to be able to sell it and win that bid. So creative director is an awesome position, but it does take a lot of hard work and a lot of kind of, like I said, on your own time to develop and hone yourself.
I love that. Okay, so recapping really quick, you need to learn how to sell. You need to understand markets and the consumers you're selling to. Am I frozen? Everybody's frozen. Okay, everybody's back. Okay, sorry. Understanding your markets and people you're selling to. And that means talking to people, not making assumptions. You need to be able to think on your feet. And again, it's worth bearing repeating, you need to learn how to sell. One of the best things that Zach said there, I think, and one of the things that I always talk about is sales is a transfer of confidence. When you are selling somebody is buying your confidence in what it is you're selling, whether it's a service, whether it's a product. I have the best home alarm system for your protection. Buy it from me. The more confident you are and the better you can communicate how good your system is, that's how you get the sale. If you're like, yeah, I picked this logo and it's like, okay, like, I don't really know about the colors. People are going to be like, okay, you sound like an idiot. I'm not buying from you. When you're able to communicate why your choice is the best, then you're going to get sales. I love that. Thank you, Zach. Let's go to Gabriella, did you already ask a question? No, you haven't. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess my question would be like a little bit similar to Tan's, but like as someone who's always been kind of like interested in working at an ad agency and potentially working as like an art director or creative director, what would your advice be? What would your advice be to someone who is considering this type of job? And what can I be doing now that can really prepare me for this position?
So it's a great question, and it's probably one of the most challenging questions in terms of designers and art, jobs, professions, period. There is a fine line between staying true to yourself and doing just something for the client. Now, my recommendation is probably not going to be the recommendation for a lot of people, but to me, having a work, home life balance is incredibly important to my happiness as an individual. So me staying true to myself, if I developed 5 logos and I knew 3 of them were more something that I was liking and I was focused on, I had to be okay trying to pitch that, because the client might not necessarily like it, but I knew if I was going to stay in this industry for a really long time, if I was just the worker bee and doing as I was told, I would get exhausted and burnt out. So I had to stay true to myself in terms of what made me happy. It might not have necessarily always got me a job, but if I was always trying to just satisfy the client, and that's why my specific example of working with Amber, there were certain times where I wanted to present this. I was pretty sure they weren't going to like it, but I wanted to do it. It made me happy designing it. I had to be okay with those moments. because I knew in the long run, I didn't want to just be the grinder. You're grinding all day, you'll get burnt out. It's, you're doing, let's say an auto dealership hires you or Carvana, and it's just routine over. You're going to get exhausted. So you've got to find ways to explore how to do new things, because a lot of times people are comfortable with what they have and they aren't necessarily looking for something new until you say, I want to explore that. I want to take, a logo that has been around for ages and just try it on my own. How can I make it mine? Because I think personality comes through huge, and whether it's art or direction, creative direction, how you come across as an individual is very important. And if you're kind of like, another car ad, here it is, sale, it can get exhausting. So how can you take something that has been done 1,000 times and do it a little different, put your own spin on it? Because it's going to be those jobs and those kind of things that will keep you passionate about what you're doing. It's a little easier to say for the creatives, for the PR people. That's, another challenge, because you kind of have to put that off to the side and really write and, put context together for the client. And you kind of have to take that personality out of it sometimes. So that's a little tougher of a job. But from a creative standpoint, just do what makes you happy. And in the long run, if you're at an agency, you might go to, there are tons of firms around here where junior designers come, they get ground into this floor and they're gone within 6 months. And that's just the job. So you have to find the little wins and the little kind of things that excite you and keep you passionate about this environment.
That is such good advice, Zach. And I saw this thing on Instagram last night. I'll send it out to the group, but it was just somebody had posted a TikTok in their story. And it was this young guy and he's playing piano. And I think it's a Bruno Mars song where it's like, I sit here looking at the moon or something like that. And his TikTok was, what if this was written from another perspective of the person at the moon looking down at you? That's a random guy who loves music and took it upon himself to engage in a creative exercise. So I'm not going to give you homework assignments. It's up to you to figure out how you can play and get creative. And I'll send this out again. It's just like a beautiful song. A good example of somebody going to figure it out on their own and be creative. So you've got to create the opportunities for yourself to practice. So if it's in your writing, write a PR pitch for somebody and say, here, I practice. I wrote this for your company, car dealership or whatever. Or, hey, I did this. Or if you're working on a project for AF Marketing, are you taking the opportunity to come up with 3 different concepts and then say, Amber, can I take 15 minutes to pitch you on which one I think you should do? Or are you just delivering me something? So you guys have this container, not just with me, but with our clients, to exercise in that way. And I think that that's such good advice, Zach, because like you said earlier, people showing up and like expecting things to come to them, you've got to create your own opportunities to get the practice so that you can practice selling to me, so you can practice convincing me, practice collaborating with each other. Like if you want to work on a project, you want to be an art director, why don't you collaborate with one of your teammates or a classmate or whatever to say, can we work on this together? Because just having those conversations is going to give you the practice that you need, so you'll be better off.
And I think along those lines, as getting into agency life, there are expectations for designers. A creative director and art director expects you to do. They're going to communicate to you. And one of the biggest things you can do is listen. So if you are expected to present 3 concepts, you need to make sure 3 concepts, you have listened to the requirements. You are going to give them a product that addresses their requirements. Now, you could take the opportunity on your own time to give them a 4th and a 5th and say, here are the 3 directions that I think really are tailored towards your requirements. But if I could just take this time to present these 2, because I came at them from a different angle. And sometimes it's an angle that maybe the art director, the client, the creative director, the owner didn't even think about. Like Amber's just concept of you're looking up. Well, what if you're looking down? So it's, you have to kind of be, now I wouldn't come to the table with 3 concepts that are only yours, because again, you're not listening. And if you're not trainable as a designer and you're not listening, you're going to get cut real fast, because you know, there's only so many times an art director can say, did you not listen to the pitch? Like the client said, don't use this, and you use that. So you kind of have to take that opportunity to provide, you know, what is expected of you, and then come at it from your own personal angle. Give it your own flair. Throw in some random color or a font that you love, or whatever. You know, if you're writing something, maybe drop in a piece of humor, because maybe it's a client that wasn't sure, oh, it's a professional service, you know, but if you just drop in maybe a little bit of humor, they're like, wow, that's actually kind of catchy. It kind of lightens the mood. It's engaging, you know, and they might have never even thought about that. And it might take a little bit of a pitch to get them comfortable with it. So you have to think about kind of doing both.
I love that. And the creative direction will always be never use Papyrus or Zapfina. It is literally, or Comic Sans, like just don't do it. Perla, did you have anything that you wanted to share or ask?
Yeah, so you kind of like touched on it a little bit before, but I kind of wanted to get like a little bit more like in depth on it. It was about like creative burnout and like staying creative, because I know that like sometimes you really hit like a wall and then you kind of don't know how to dig yourself out of that. So I was kind of just curious about like how you dealt with like that kind of issue.
Yep. Yeah. So creative burnout is a challenge. I mean, and it depends a lot on your surroundings, your environment. You will see some agencies where burnout is seriously real because you're just being grinded. The way I got around creative burnout was if I knew I was going to have a 2 to 3 week hard, you know, deadline, and I was going to be beat, I would go home and I would work on a project that interested me, whether it was creative or designing a new room in my home or focusing on something else, but still keeping the creative mind going. It was good for me because it gave you an outlet to, God, it's been a grind for 3 weeks. I've only been working on this ridiculous book, you know, or whatever. And you need that outlet, especially as creative people, whether you're a writer, a social writer, whatever. You need outlets. You need other ways to keep your mind fresh. And because if you're just doing one thing and one thing and one thing and one thing and one thing, it's easy to just get that tunnel vision and not just keep yourself aware of other projects. You know, I would always be bouncing around the office. Look at what other people are doing. So while you might be tasked a certain thing for 6 months, a year, whatever, you've got to make sure that you are still doing and taking the time to push those creative boundaries in other projects. And that's why I highly recommend, if you're, you know, a freelancer or whatever, you know, throw things up on Fiverr, you know, see if you can get these other projects that truly interest you. Because I could, and it's kind of an individual kind of, you know, choice, but I could design from 9 to 5 and go home and eat, and then design from 6 to 10 because I just love design that much. I wanted to go, you know, look on Dribbble and look on forums, see what other people were doing. I don't know if you guys are members of AIGA or things like that, or well, that's Arizona, but you know, some type of graphic association, creative space to where you can really see what other people are doing. And you can start to say, wow, that's really awesome. You know, I want to focus on something like that. Practice building campaigns, practice, you know, stuff that, because right now you're just in the trenches, or you're not yet in the trenches, but you're soon to be in the trenches. And a lot of people in the graphic design space, they don't see that you're going to get there. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of honing your skills, you know, keep looking to the future. And a lot of designers forget that there is that top level of the ladder. And then they just kind of fall into, the doer. I'm just doing, I'm doing. It's like, you're doing just because you're okay doing. Like, stop being okay with doing and push yourself to, you know, learn how to do something else, or learn how to, you know, pretend you're in the next level.
Oh, Zach, that's such good feedback. And Perla, I love that question. And I'm going to turn the next question to Rachel, but I want to give her credit on something first, which was at our summit about 3 weeks ago, we had this discussion, not in this context, but similar. And we were talking about books. And Emily and I were like, oh my God, we forgot about books. Like, Rachel is such a great reader. And it was one of those things where after looking at a computer screen all day and thinking client, to just give my brain a break, but still be engaged and going to read not a nonfiction book, but like a legit beach read, like turn off the brain. I just read the best book. I shared it with you guys in the Slack, a very girly book, but it was so refreshing to me and makes me have something to look forward to after work. And then I feel refreshed coming back. So I love that so much. Rachel, do you have a question you wanted to ask Zach?
Hi, I do. I have more of like a practical question. You talked a little bit about like building your cover letter for your position at Bluefish. And I'm wondering like if you have any tips for how do we like set ourselves apart when we're just like sending in cover letters and resumes? Like, do you have any tips for like how to like craft your cover letter to like make it kind of stand out from other ones?
So cover letters are probably one of the more challenging things. I think people assume it's just, I'm going to write a quick letter. I'd be great for this graphic design position. Here's my experience. Here's my school portfolio. For the designers here, one of the best things you can do is not include your school portfolio. To work on little campaigns or things on your own and put them in your portfolio. But I think cover letters are interesting because it is your one shot at conveying your personality and your characteristics and what you like and what you're like. One of the worst things you can do is get into an agency where the environment doesn't fit you as a person. You're not going to thrive. It's never going to work. So if you get turned down 9 positions, but the 10th one loved who you are, your uniqueness, they thought that it would click with the clients, their current client roster, that'll be your most successful position because they read your cover letter. They kind of understood who you were and what you were coming from. Maybe you have a little bit of dry sense of humor, or maybe you're just passionate about this. Like, get across your individual personality traits in cover letters. And not by saying, I'm smart, I graduated this, I've had this client list. It's like, that's great. They want to know who you are as an individual. And if you're going to be a good fit. As junior designers, art directors and creative directors, they know, or they hope they can train you into a better designer, a better art director, they're hiring you thinking that's going to be it. So they want to know that you will be a cool person to work with, a creative person to work with, because they're probably going to be right next to you. And the awesome thing about this industry is everybody's creative, everybody's fun. We're not talking, a law firm or, an accounting firm where it's like, everybody hates their life. It's not, finance. So people want to be working with people who they find similar interests. They are making their daily lives 9 to 5 more enjoyable. I would sneak in little funny bits about Zappino or whatever, just to kind of get a little snicker, but also what it did was say that I'm in touch with what's going on in the world. I know papyrus, so it shows a little bit of thought and strategy of, I know papyrus is so overused, I would never use it. And they're like, okay, so little sense of humor, but he knows what he's talking about. So, and don't make them too long, right? They got to be quick to the point, that sort of thing. I will send my actual cover letter. I still have it to this day. So I'll send it out to Amber and she can kind of disperse it so you can see what mine was. But I think it's one of those things, and you can't get it in front of enough people. Like, send it to everybody, that and just get little tips and tricks. And some people might give you suggestions and you're like, that's not me. It's not me. Like, oh, you need to be more formal, but I'm not more formal. Like, don't put me in that box, because I don't want to be, I don't want them to consume me as, oh, I'm just bump. So
I love that. And what's so funny, Zach, you have your cover letter from Bluefish from what, 18 years ago?
Yeah, 2005.
Yeah. Okay. So, you guys, your cover letter and resume is just the wedding. The job is the marriage. So what you're more interested in is finding the great place to work, and the cover letter is just the in. So the best cover letters that I get are like, hey, I saw you speak at San Diego State. And I'm like, ooh, you're a fan? Like, okay, I'll talk. You know what I'm saying? Like, go to the things, meet the people, make the relationships, reach out on LinkedIn, have those informational interviews. Hey, I talked to so-and-so at your agency, and from what I heard, and it's not like necessarily a implicit referral, but you've got some context in and in. We'll talk more about that later too, but Zach, I would love to see that cover letter. So thanks for offering to share.
Along those same lines, Amber made a fantastic point, is research the agency. You want to know what clients they're working with. You might not have any interest in those clients. Are you desperate for a job? If so, fine. But when you get that call back, you want to sound informed. You want to sound educated. It's not just, oh, I'm going to be interviewed. I go into interviews as I'm going to have a discussion with these people. I'm going to talk about what their strategy is. As an agency, what do you look for in clients? Are you picky? It's a conversation. And the more engaging you can be in those interviews, the more impressed they will be of, oh, it's not, what's your education? What have you worked on? All that stuff can be seen online. Like, they are trying to get who you are and how engaged you're going to be. And it's really important. Again, goes back to conversational. You're selling. You're selling yourself. So getting that communication across is important.
The other thing that I wanted to note too, as speaking of being online, for Tan, Svatika, Perla, this all applies to you too, of having online portfolios. So Tan, everything you work on and create client facing goes online for you, because that's really, really important. Svatika and Perla, whether it's in a Instagram caption that you wrote or a press release that you wrote, like, get that in a portfolio in a way that makes a lot of sense. Emily, question from you.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Also, sorry, I literally live in a flight path. So if you hear an airplane, that's what's going on right now. I'm just curious, is there a company or brand or whatever right now that you think is doing everything right creatively, or that you source a lot of inspiration from?
I've probably been asked that question 1,000 times, and it's challenging because in today's age, there are so many companies that do it really well, depending on the market and depending on the demographic and depending on the goal, right? If you take user experience, for example, Tesla, their brand is absolutely spot on, and the execution of how simple, think of how simple the car is. I don't know if any of you have driven in a Tesla. It's so simple. And that completely has a direct correlation with how simple the website is. I'm not going to give you 1,000 buttons to push. You go to GMC and you build a truck and it's almost like information overload. So they've done a phenomenal job of mirroring their product with their online execution, with their advertising. They just do a great job of making everything feel cohesive. Back in the day, the easiest answer was Apple. Obviously, it's a little, different now just because Apple's Apple and, whatever. So, I think the brands that are standing out these days are making the jump to do something a little different, a little more unique, because sometimes in this industry, unique sometimes isn't always good, but just because it's not good, it's not bad. It's different because you might be that first person to push the boundaries, and then you might see another client say, wait, I kind of like that. And then they push it. And then, so expanding kind of the horizons and trying to push those boundaries and trying to do something different can sometimes be a huge benefit. Sometimes you might get slapped in the face and be like, nope, we weren't trying to do anything different. We're completely comfortable. But being able to push those things, again, like the pitch, it's like, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to throw a curveball at you. Let's see how what's the reaction? Are they like, no, sorry, try again? You're going to have those. I mean, it is what it is. So I think brands out there these days, especially digital, it's huge. I think when you're talking about copywriting and stuff like that, you got such a short amount of time and space, to capture somebody's attention. It's just kind of tailoring it to, again, how do you catch somebody's attention in such a short amount of time? So that's a good question. It's a tough question. There's a lot of answers out there.
I love that. And I don't care about cars. I went on the Tesla website for the first time, maybe 2 weeks ago. And that's one of the inspirations we're using for the next, for the site that we build at, at Craft, because it's so well executed. Zach, that was the perfect answer. I have one question for you too, and then we'll wrap up. You know a lot of stuff. You are somebody I look up to so much, not just in design, but also in business and leadership and communicating, working with people. Of all the things that you know and the way that you run your business and you do your life and all these things, if you had to break down what you know, how much of it came from tribal knowledge, stuff you learned from somebody in a workplace, how much came from self-education, and how much came from formal education?
So me specifically will be very different from my partner. Like going back to, again, the platform that U of A provided me. The platform was, I didn't learn a ton of technical stuff, but that was going to come in time. I can teach myself that. There's classes online, there's YouTube now, there's everything. So if I were to break it down, I think self-taught is probably 75 to 80%. There are things that you get out of school and you're not going to be taught it. You're not going to be taught how to have a successful pitch. You're not going to be taught how to relate to people. And that's all self-education. It's all going home and consuming. I watch TV because you need to see what other brands are doing. I go, like she had mentioned, the touchscreen at McDonald's. I'll walk around a mall. I mean, my life right now is touchscreens. I will engage in every experience I can because, again, that wasn't taught to me. I want to see how others are doing it and then how I can improve on it. Learning from others, I think that was immensely important early on in my career. Now it's more, I'm kind of self-learning and self-teaching. But when I was younger, I had to be a sponge. I had to listen to, whether I disagreed with you or didn't like you, I had to listen to that perspective. In a creative industry, you're going to butt heads. You're going to have those pitches. You're going to have those relationships where you don't agree. I have fights with my partner, but we get over it. It's business. Like, it's nothing personal. It's, I'm going to take those kind of interactions and grow as an individual. So when you're young, yes, learn, listen, soak, enjoy everything that Amber says. Take it as gold because she has been through the trials and tribulations. So soak it all up. And then once you get to your 30s and 35s, where you feel comfortable saying, okay, I have really listened to, and I've, don't ever stop listening, listen to the TED Talks, listen to how people speak, how people pitch, but do it on your own, counting and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you use so little of that information in the real world that you've got to rely on yourself.
I love that. Zach, you've been incredible. What I want to do to wrap it up is just have everybody around the horn, their number one takeaway or their favorite thing. I'll start it off. My favorite thing that you said was when you were early on in your career and you were pitching on your practice pitching with Ashley, with your girlfriend at the time. I talk about this all the time. It is so important to practice and get the feedback. And that means not thinking about it or not writing it out. It means speaking it and getting that marble mouth out and getting some feedback and practicing how the words feel on your tongue and your mouth. That makes you so much better. And you have resources around you. I've been in plenty of relationships where I was not comfortable doing that with my partner. And I kind of live by this rule of thumb. My friend Natalia taught me, if you can't meditate in front of your boyfriend or your girlfriend, you need to find a different partner. And that is the truth. And if you can find people and friends and whomever it is that you can get feedback from, keep them their gold. Svatika, do you want to start off with kind of takeaways, favorite things?
Yeah, I think biggest takeaway for me is like everyone that we've heard speak has said that one thing where it's like everyone who comes out of college like thinks that they're gonna get everything handed to them. So it's kind of refreshing like to hear other people say that, because it's like a kind of not slap in the face. What's the word? Like it's eye-opening to know that that's what is like kind of a norm that's going out there. So like we can catch it early and make sure that we're not part of that group, So
yeah, just stay motivated. Don't expect handouts. They're not going to give it to you, and you've got to put in the work. And a lot of people coming out of college, whether they've had things handed to them their whole lives, like don't expect that. Like if you're going to open your business, you have got to go get it yourself. You have got to put in the work. And you're never going to be upset for putting in the work. You're going to grow as an individual, as a human, as a partner, as a whatever. You're always going to be a better person because you put in the effort.
I love that. Perla, do you have a takeaway, a final thought question?
Yes, takeaway for me was just like working on my own passion projects outside of my own like work projects, just because I feel like tunnel vision can be something that's like very like, yeah, I get tunnel vision. And so just having that like distinction for me is just very reassuring as well.
I love it. Tan, final
Everybody,
thoughts?
and to your
Oh,
point,
sorry.
everybody has those plateaus. Don't get discouraged. It's just, it happens. It's like growth spurts, right? You grow and then you plateau, and then you grow and then you plateau. It happens. Don't get frustrated. Take that time to learn something different. If you're just in this moment where none of your designs are getting picked and this and that, it's okay. It happens. It happens to all of us. Just as long as you're learning from those experiences, that's all you can do.
I love it. Tan, do you have a final thought or takeaway?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you, Zach, for coming and talking to us today. But I think the biggest thing I learned was how much of a salesperson you have to be as a creative director, because not only are you responsible for communicating your own ideas to your clients, but also like the ideas and the creative concepts of your entire team, and also just relaying what the client wants back to your team and understanding their needs. I think that's like what I really gained from that insight.
That's such a good one. Emily, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. So I really appreciated what you said about not compromising who you are to fit a company, but instead stay true to yourself and find a company that fits you. And I feel like that's my favorite thing about working for Amber is like I feel appreciated for who I am, and I don't have to like do the emotional labor of pretending to be like someone else. So I really appreciated that.
Well, thanks to you, now we speak the same Gen Z language, so we're like on the same platform. Rachel, do you have a final thought or takeaway?
Yeah. I think like my major takeaway was like the importance of like honing your craft, and not only like in your 9 to 5, but like all the time. And I especially think that that's important for like us younger adults, like just the importance of continually like honing our craft.
I love it. And Gabriella?
What really resonated with me was when we were talking about like creative burnout. And this is something that I deal with like a lot, like in my education. Like even I remember like my first week of design class, like I could not use the pen tool on Illustrator. Like I could not figure it out. And I was like, this is not for me. And I remember calling my dad, like crying, like being like, and my teacher was like, you're such a slow learner. And I'm like, but that's okay. Like, it's okay to be a slow learner. Like I finally got it and like I crafted it, and now I can do like fun stuff on Illustrator for myself and show it on my portfolio. So it's definitely like, don't get discouraged and just keep like going,
That's funny you say the pen tool. That's when we pull in production artists, that's the first thing. It's like, so how's your skills with the pen tool? That's funny because
Yeah.
that's probably one of the challenges for every junior designer is learning the pen tool. It's horrible.
Mhm.
And that's why I don't know it, and I hire designers to do it for us. Zach, what is your kind of summary? How does it feel to kind of go back in your career and reflect on where you are now? Like, what are your takeaways?
I actually think about my path a lot. I think it's important to understanding and remembering your past to help develop your future, because you learn lessons. You learn what you should be doing and what you can't be doing and what you want to be doing. And it's tough when you're younger to kind of say, like you said, stay true to yourself, because you kind of just need a job, or you want a job, you got to pay bills. And it's always okay to take that first step, because you might take a step where you're like, I'm not sure if it's right, and it turns out to be perfect. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's looking back on life and the decisions I made. I think investing in myself, and even the people around me, you can't do it all yourself. Do as much as you can, but you always have to look around to the support systems that you have, because a lot of people will aid in your success. Of course, it's how hard you grind or how hard the whip is cracked on you. Don't be offended by it. Amber can be a whip cracker, but she's only doing it, and she and I are very similar, and she wants to see the best that you can put forward. And you might have days where you're just off, but everybody has off days, and don't get discouraged. Then wake up, it's a new day. Look at it from a different perspective, work from a different room. You guys have a beach. I'm so jealous. I'll catch on fire if I go outside right now. So, it's one of those things where always remember who you are and what's going to make you happy. And never kind of lose sight of that as you progress your kind of, business future.
I love it. Zach, you're incredible. I'm so grateful for not just you coming to talk to everybody and myself included today, but all the guidance you've given me in business and your friendship and support. Please come to San Diego soon so that you don't light on fire and we can go you can eat oysters. I'll drink champagne. I won't eat any oysters because I think they're disgusting. Sound like a plan?
It sounds perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much, Zach, and everybody else. I'm going to follow up with Zach's cover letter when he sends it. I also am going to send you that really sweet TikTok of the guy that sings the song because I think it's just touching and it's a good creative exercise. What I'd love from all of you guys is just massive thank you and appreciation and gratitude to Zach. And let me know what else you need. If you have more follow-up questions, literally, Zach, I have 42,000 more questions for you. We could talk for 4 more hours about.
I know, I'm like, we should do a series.
Literally, because I want to talk about agency life, leadership, bad leadership, what that looks like working with other creative directors, like so much more to touch on. So we should do this again.
Yep, absolutely. And absolutely share. I got a couple LinkedIn requests. Share my contact information. I am always available to answer questions and help. I love, helping to kind of grow the younger generation and the younger minds because you guys are future. So I'm always available for help. So let me know.
Thank you so much. All right, guys, I'll see you all later. Tan, I'm going to hit you up in just a couple minutes. Okay. Cool. Thanks, guys. See you later. Bye, Zach.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye, everybody.